What were some of the big issues that came up during your 6 years at MACSA?
There were all kinds of issues. Foremost was the fact that United Way it was a United Way funded agency. When I became executive director, as I recall, we had a budget of about $60,000 from United Way. And I think there were 5 staff people, including secretary. But when I left there 6 years later, we had a staff of we had many programs and services that had been developed, including that co-op program for campesinos or for the people up in Gilroy area, 4 C's programs, daycare programs for children of migrants and others. So education became a continuing concern. We published Dr. Galarza's reports on the Bilingual Studio Lab. We published a report that he wrote an introduction to on Ruben Salazar. So we did, and then we got funding for Dr. Galarza taught me a very valuable lesson. We provided staff support for his work at Alviso, and he got us a LADAS grant, which was some foundation that provided funding for helping community groups that came through the Jewish Community Council in Los Angeles, of all things, to MACSA. So he knew how to manipulate funding sources, foundations, and then he taught me that because we had that money at MACSA, how to use that as leverage, how to use it as upfront money to say to somebody else, we have upfront money that has been given to us through a foundation, including United Way funds. So by the time we developed, Casa Libre was an important program that Jack Brito was behind too. And he studied, and he knew the penal system pretty well. So he figured out that we needed to establish like a halfway house from people that were in the pen to go to halfway house before they went to the community, released, and maybe to accelerate some of their parole or probation periods. And that, as far as I know, is still operating. And it was very important because Jack was very good at understanding budgets, understanding accountability for funding, and I think that he was very good at knowing particularly the needs that Chicanos had coming out of the pen to get reintroduced and oriented, trained and educated to become contributing citizens. So that was a very important program that I think, given the fact that so much of the prison population was Chicano and black. So that was another, 4 C's was another program that got developed. Community coordinated child care programs that I helped to get. I got on their board of directors and helped get MACSA funding for it, etc. Not MACSA, but other sources of funds. The other important program that I mentioned earlier was the Battered Women's Shelter in Mid-Peninsula. It was called the Mid-Peninsula Battered Women's Shelter. And so those are programs we had, plus ongoing programs of just finding out whether United Way agents in particular were attending to the needs of the Mexican American community. That was a very important strategy approach because, in other words, MACSA became sort of the advocate for the Chicano community to hold other agencies accountable about meeting the needs of the community. And that took a lot of finessing, it took a lot of diplomacy, but it took a lot of confrontation in some instances. And we had partnerships in that effort. Family Service Association, where Sofia Mendoza worked, became a key partner in us becoming an information referral center, to know that specifically we had one of our people working in an agency setting that could open doors for them and help get them the help they needed. And that happened also like in the daycare center business. It helped with a housing program that we became part of. We housed, for instance, we rented the MACSA was in this big old house that was owned by Capra, was his name. Funny, his name comes up, but no, APRA, it was APRA. Capra is the name of my new nephew to be. But anyhow, what I'm saying is that we spread out in programs and services and in big advocates, strong advocates for the Mexican American community in education, housing, jobs, health. We were very strong advocates in helping Bob Sillen, that name comes, who was the director of the county health, the hospital, the county hospital. And we got a $5 million grant from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation to establish the Gardner Center, and then there was one other center, I believe. In other words, centers out in the Chicano community that brought health services closer to the community. When the city experienced severe budgetary problems, and they were going to close down recreation centers, we took over one of the centers near, God, what was that name of that park? It's out on the east side. There was a recreation center in the park there. They were going to close it. So we went to the city, for instance, and we negotiated for them to provide a very basic budget just for janitorial and paying the utilities, and we would provide the staff. So we got a grant from the United Way, increased our funding, arguing that the services for recreational services for kids and their families were absolutely essential. And so that we would continue operating the center with our staff if they provided us the facilities and a basic budget.
Was that the park out by near East Ridge Shopping Mall?
I don't remember.
Okay.
Yeah, it was closer to downtown,
Oh, okay.
but I forget what the name of it was. But anyhow, just to point out how all these programs and services developed, it took an amount of planning and organizing to get the community not only to question San Jose Unified, but also to look at Eastside Union High School District, the McKinley Elementary School District, and out of that, you got a job at Eastside Union High School District, and you got Joe Cota to cooperate in establishing the Ernesto Galarza Institute for Community Development there. And that, you know all about that, and that became a model for how interagency collaboration could work between the school district, agencies, public and private, that were there to support services, and even the police department to know how to better relate to the needs of kids and so forth out in the community.
Did, speaking of the Ernesto Galarza Institute at Eastside Union High School District, did that happen during the time you were back at San Jose State?
I think it started, some of those discussions actually started at MACSA, like what can we do out on the east side became the question to improve educational services. What did we learn from our San Jose Unified experience that could be applied to helping the parents and the kids in the East Side School District and the Franklin McKinley School District? So those discussions led, then I returned to work at San Jose State in 1979, and then that became more of a reality when you got a job as an administrator at Eastside Union. And what was the name of that school principal that was a Chicano there? Anyhow, she came in and she helped out, and then Joe Cotto took an active role as superintendent to provide leadership to bringing in other agency heads to meet and plan on how agencies could work together there. Because one thing that we all agreed on is there was no single agency that could provide for all of the needs of the community, be they educational, health, or housing, or whatever. But the Ernesto Galarza Institute, which we helped to establish, and which Joe Cotto supported very strongly, and so did the welfare department and the health department, mental health department, and others. The police department became part of it.
And probation?
Probation. So that became a model for going beyond just, we'll work together to how do we do it? When is it more propitious to be able to push certain programs and services? Who assumes the lead role with what kind of funds, or to seek what kind of funding to help kids succeed in school? That was a very important learning experience for all of us, but a model for other districts and other areas to follow.